A proposed adaptation that we each take our own sheet and create our own history of how we ended up here. And then we put it together. So you can start anywhere, in the beginning of your life or when you got to UNM.
Mine started with before time began. I love that word when they say since time immemorial. I'm like, what does that really mean? Like before they started tracking time, I guess, but we came out of the earth right here in Bears Ears area, and so there's these mountains that look like the Bears Ears, and there's a spring under a cave, and that's what I tried to draw. It just comes out of the ground, the water. And so, yeah, and there's even like petroglyphs. And my daughter, she put her hands in the mud, the red mud, and put her mark on the wall there. And I didn't realize till my friend told me, oh, the archaeologists are going to track that. And I was like, I didn't really think about that. So now there's like probably 10,000-year-old handprints, and then from 2022 handprints for my daughter. So that's why I drew that. But there's this beautiful like oasis that you would never think was there in the desert, and that's where then those are our ancestral migration routes to where we are today in Giwa, which you have it down in Santo Domingo. That's our colonized name, but we have our indigenous name is Giwa, and it's just 30 miles up the road. And but that's where I learned about community. That's where I learned about love, and I always go back to that, but I don't know how to just kind of, the river goes, but it always goes back to these places. I went to NMSU, I went south. Cochise College, Arizona, I got a basketball scholarship, but then when I came back up to UNM, that's when I got into the CBPR. Nina was my teacher, and then I went, as a student to the CBPR Institute. So after that, I also did work in Mescalero, some research there, suicide prevention work. But my river branches off because I also went to Suicide Prevention Resource Center. I quit my job so I could focus on my dissertation at ASU, and I got my PhD in Justice Studies at the School of Social Transformation. But all of this other work with tribes and across the nation and their suicide prevention work, I feel like that was community engagement. And then we're bringing our indigenous knowledge, our indigenous ways of doing things in with the colonized way of doing things, then I started to push back. And I learned that at ASU about pushing back. Dr. Brian Brayboy was my co-chair, and he wrote Tribal Crit, which probably isn't allowed to be taught anymore. But that's kind of interesting, and how I came back to UNM with Nina. Luckily, she called me up during the pandemic. But in between, there's this Standing Rock. Remember when water is life, and the government was really on the side of the corporations, and I was on the side with the indigenous people, and it was just like an eye-opener. What I saw on the news was flipped from what I was experiencing in real life. I was like, that's not how it was. I mean, there was guns on the grandmothers praying at the river, which it was so not cool. And so I really kind of disengaged with a lot of colonial system of education, all of that. I just didn't even like it anymore. I just really wanted to just step away. But now that we're bringing this community back into academic, I just feel like it's at least we're a voice at the table. Otherwise, if I don't show up, then who's going to be here to contribute from the local indigenous perspective? So I just wanted to share that. A lot of times too, we have Navajo Dene people in the university, and I think they check that box we have Native Americans, but they're not from here. And I like to advocate for the people that are actually got displaced from here to bring their voices to the table.
Okay, my turn. So I'm gonna start since the beginning. So I basically I was born in Ciudad Juarez, so that's me right there. Okay, family of four. And my father was a bracero back in the 1950s and a blacksmith, amazing blacksmith. So one of the things once we were able to come across, there was a struggle there. So my father having an accident, and we basically really struggled. It was really difficult for him and for us, but eventually we got through it, and we built our own house. I mean, it was all through push because we were being let go from our rental place, so we really had to do something really quick. Then I came up to UNM, first one leaving the house, to come to the School of Architecture. And that's me with my two daughters, and then once I graduated in the 90s, I actually started to incorporate myself to what is still now Cornerstone's Community Partnerships. And basically it was a nonprofit organization. So I got into the nonprofit world, and we used to basically assist communities in restoring their historic buildings. And no cost at all to them. It was all our contribution to them. So I got into the nonprofit world, and then soon after that, I started to make connections throughout communities, throughout the state, outside the state, around the world, and we'll continue to work on it. And then with Mexico as well, all these there's a lot more, but all these represent workshops throughout Mexico, so it's binational. I started to really engage myself, and then eventually into the Americas and travel quite a lot. But all these green ones, and there's some, but there's tons of more of community work. And then once I came back to UNM for my graduate studies, Cornerstone was struggling. So then I basically integrated my knowledge in historic preservation and community work and embedded that into my courses. So then every course that I usually teach, we usually give back to the community. So that's my community engagement there when it comes to any youth training projects as well, which I've done a lot. So I really enjoy being with students and teaching. That's one of my big things. And of course, all of this is also part of the community engagement research. So yeah, there's a lot, but so really quick rundown.
So I start my journey growing up in a family of farm workers, not farm owners, and the dichotomy of being the first-gen college student of who my father was. So having a family of farm workers and some education was a big dichotomy to grow up as a child. But that meant that I just went straight to school, straight doing what I needed to do that my parents said. Became a physician and served in a rural community, which was very eye-opening to understand the limitations of medicine, on how the upstream factors can never be addressed when a patient is sitting right in front of you, right? So had to, I need to see my liver. Really got very interested in prevention, but that meant that I was not a real true doctor, right? If I was thinking about prevention and public health, and personal history of family being affected by cancer was really well, what can we do now? We should have done something before. Came to the US as an immigrant experience, and came for just 2 years to do my public health, but then fell in love.
There's a theme.
Yeah. And fell in love and decided to actually got interested in research. What is this thing called research? In St. Louis, Missouri, where there is a stark reality of what racism does to communities, right? So I didn't know Nina then, but I knew your textbook. That's how I knew what CBPR was. That was my crutch to understand. And going back to my own roots as a Dalit woman growing up in that dichotomy, had to revisit structural causes of health quite a bit in my dissertation, with Black community members facing crucial decisions around cancer prevention. which is where CVPR really became the core of my work. But as I was growing as a researcher in my own studies, realized that I wanted to take research back into the practice space. Like, how do clinicians benefit from all the research that I'm doing, right? Because I was always a clinician, I still am in my deep core, right? So implementation science is where I really focused on in the last 10 years or so, as an opportunity to really promote equity, not in just the outcomes that we are trying to achieve, but in the process by which we do research. So CVPR has become like an important mainstay in how I focus on implementation of known interventions. Very unsexy science, but very meaningful for me. And so after having some opportunity to learn about this at NCI, at the National Cancer Institute at NIH, I got this opportunity to apply it in New Mexico, all of this knowledge. So it's been a big grasp for me over there. And now with such a core foundation set down, and with these new policies coming up, what is a question mark? With Trump's anti-DEI efforts and all of these new realities that we have to deal with, how can we? So for me, the river ends in like collective impact and ensuring that we are all coming together and understanding what it means for each of us, but as a group as well. So some of these leadership opportunities with CPR and my own Center for Dissemination and Implementation Science at HSC, I'm hoping that we can all contribute towards togetherness and coming stronger out of all this.
I love teaching. I absolutely love teaching, and the number of students I was teaching, I just found it fantastic. I loved it, energetic. My research and the fight for tenure, and then eventually becoming grad advisor kind of shrunk my world, which I didn't particularly enjoy. That all just gave me much. Like the type of research I was doing was very inward, very isolated. But the game changer for me was when I became internship coordinator for the poli-sci department around 2015 or so. And that opened my eyes to the importance that UNM has to these groups, to nonprofits, to the state, to everything. I built relationships doing that for about 5 years, and I realized the importance of internships for students and experiential learning in general. Then that became a core part of my research, and that's where my research really started to take off. And I started to realize that incorporating myself into communities, mostly at that point, it was with state legislators and with nonprofit groups and learning and hearing them, producing some research that made a difference in the state meant the world to me. Then the MVP directorship came around too, and then it just exponentially grew. And that's how it went. Okay. And I just love in the last 10 years of my time at UNM, it's been really great because everything's open. My communities have opened rather than narrowing like it did my fight for tenure. So I truly appreciate it.
I started my river at the point where that opened my eyes to community engagement, and that was with the civil unrest in Los Angeles in 1992. So, actually, it was before that. I had to go before that. There was a fire at Baldwin House, and my friends who lived there, but that got me, going out to help. Then came the unrest. We started a whole organization, and I had my own practice. That kind of led to invitations to teach. And then I set my sights on community engagement was my thing. Do that. Same universities were good. I got a job at the University of Kentucky. While on my way to start their design center, while I was on my way to grad school so that I could get that job. So I took a job for a minute, went to grad school, that's all the flowers, and then came back, got the job at University of Cincinnati. There were a lot of rocks here because there were some rocky points. And that led to my getting here in 2011. The job that I had applied for in 1996, I want to say, the design center, what helped take me from all the LA stuff to here was the MSS Geraldine Forbes Essays a mentor who helped me on every step and got me here. The work through DPAC with New Mexico Main Street, getting introduced to the International District, going to the CBPR Institute. I think that was here today. There's a project along the way that really pushed CBPR for me and DPAC, which was in Santa Fe. So that's the tree with all the leaves and the growth, and our community partners there. That's
So mine starts in Kenya, where I was born, right way back, but it has relevance because it was, there's all these flowers and it's joy, right? And there's poverty, which is part of it, but it's still joyful, all these flowers. And then this was the two stories of immigration. The first one is a forced migration, and it led to a whole bunch of backlash and other, whether it's racism or other isms, when I landed in England. And all our family did when I was very, very young. And so getting a sense of how when you're forced to migrate is a whole different thing, right?
Was your whole family forced, or you were forced because you were young?
All of them were forced, and some of family members were scattered to other parts of the world. So it's like the diaspora is all, this is why you will find East African Indians all over the planet. And then you have this bridge, which is another immigration story, and it was marriage. And you'll have, like these stories of even during all of the isms going on, there was community organizing going on that helped us have free food, have housing, education, all the rest of it in England. And it was a collective of organizers from all different backgrounds, and the collective, whether they're white, Bangladeshi, Indian, West Indian, African, call themselves the Black Collective, and they help all the 50,000 immigrants that came to sort of settle. And then the immigration story that's totally different. And then I get to be in New Mexico. That's where I landed with my second immigration story 30 years ago. And all of that time has been because of that history, working with community organizers, nonprofits, people that I can learn and grow from, mostly working on social transformation and finding my way to seeing that the journey I took, I want others that have had similar experiences have those mentors and connections. So the youth organizing with community and apprenticeships and the internships and all of that is what I was dedicating my life to in the US. And I have this huge tree, which is the shade of family, friends, community all along the way. And then I have me sitting under a tree, reading, learning, teaching, doing CRT, and doing CBPR and all of the good stuff. But this hope and optimism flower's been floating all the way through it, because that's just me.
Similar, like my journey starting in Mexico, where I'm from, but also with Lebanese ancestry. We have some, I know how to cook better Lebanese food than Mexicans. So we were always living in that kind of two world. I went to a Catholic non-school, so I started there when I was in middle school doing some social service. That was voluntary. In high school we had to do it, so it was like 6 years of service to the community. And after that I came to New Mexico for 4 months in 2007. And it's just good. Studying, and at that time I was not involved so much with the community except for some Native American practices that I was invited when I started working for jail. Right now, and a lot of like hurdles and rocks and obstacles trying to finish my PhD. This is like one master, the other masters, and then this is in PhD, like a long scroll because it took a long time. But finally getting like to more calm waters, but at the same time it's a little bit difficult also with the climate and also as a foreign and as a foreign international. And then with all the things that have been happening, and then I just have a question mark because I don't know what's going to happen next, but just trying to go with the flow.
I started mine out just, I don't know the Louisiana was, and then my mom moved us out of there to the city and then to Missouri because she got a master's degree and started working in this Families First program with children that were at risk of being placed outside their homes. And she was also like, both of my parents grew up in like the South, and my extended family is, white people of the South, so racist undercurrents. And both of my parents, luckily, broke away from that and kind of composted that garbage. And my mom was very social justice oriented. When David Duke ran for I don't know which office he ran, but a national office in Louisiana. She had the No Duke sticker on her car and was just very careful about it. So anyway, that's kind of the foundation. And then I came to New Mexico when I was 17, and then a few years later got to start working at UNM as a reporter. Was hired by Marcos Martinez there. Luckily, I didn't know that that's the job that I was being hired for, but suddenly was interviewing Tom Udall. So that's kind of where my work in community, I guess, community radio station. And so over 7 or 8 years, I got to interview communities about things that are happening and contrast the takes of politicians and people in government versus people in community advocacy organizations. And then because of my journalism, I got Chris Wilson was we need more journalism in historic preservation. Okay. And so that was my foot in the door despite my bad grades in undergrad.
Not just
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I never thought I'd go to grad school. But then that snowballed into Michael letting me into the Master of Science in Architecture program focused on the built environment, which totally changed my world. And I got to work in DPAC, and then I met Nina and got to do the CPR Institute, and her class determinants in equity and public health, which I'm now a part of for the past 4 years as teaching in that class, teaching writing. And then, and so also Nina was instrumental in my current job at the DOH, which I've been in for 2 years now, bringing together public health practitioners and academics. And I also, as of August, started working with Michael again at DPAC. And so I don't know what's next, but I'm really happy to help out with this project however I can. And really believe in community engagement and partnering, even though it's really hard sometimes. What's the Design and Planning Assistance Center. It's a community design. It's the second oldest community design center at a public institution. It's been around since 1969.
So I started with my family and then I jumped all the way to UNM. So
There's lots that happen.
Lots. But I grew up in Kansas in the middle of the country, and I always thought of myself as a New York Jew because all of my family lived in New York. All of my Jewish relatives lived in New York. They were all immigrants, and but we weren't. They came for real late. They did not come thinking they were leaving. They came through Ellis Island, and they came to stay and escape the Holocaust and escape the pogroms and the Russia. So I have 2 sides of the family, but it's a very social justice oriented family. And so, but my family moved to San Francisco when I was a teenager in the middle of the 60s, which was fabulous. So I had an older brother who took, I didn't write all this, who took me to all the demonstrations and the music in Golden Gate Park. It was kind of in the late 60s, was terrific. But anyway, as a kid, my family had a really close relationship with another family in Mexico City. My father had lived there when he was a teenager, and so it was multi-generational. So I went and spent summers in Mexico and learned Spanish. And they were my family, and so that was kind of this opportunity. I would even flew down by myself. They would put me on the plane. I'd be crying. So anyway, I'd get there. And then after college, when I started this connection I have with Brazil, I was invited by a Brazilian friend of mine to go down and I didn't know what I was doing. And I went and spent a year in Brazil after college, and so I learned Portuguese and all. But I went to college and did all that. But in 1981, we moved to New Mexico. My partner got a job teaching in the English department, and so we've been here since 1981. And I had a master's at the time, and I was a woman at I got a job at the medical school. As a staff person, but I realized you don't have any power as a woman, non-physician, with masters. It wasn't going to work. So I went back I had a wonderful mentor who got me to go back to get my doctorate. I mean, he supported me all the way. So I went. So I went in and out of Berkeley. When I got my doctorate at Berkeley, then I came back and forth, and then I had again. This is probably shouldn't say this, but affirmative action absolute rules, the dean promised that he would give me a faculty position if I got my doctorate. And so I finished my doctorate in the fall, and I was faculty in January. No application. But it was through my chair made it happen with the dean of the School of Medicine, who had all the power in the world. So I became faculty. It was really weird. I mean, it doesn't happen that way anymore. But that was in the late 1980s. Anyway, I had all this different work I've done. I think I started working with tribal partners in the 1980s on this adolescent social action program. I just got caught. I mean, I just was learning so much, and people were so kind. I didn't know anything, but I feel like I was this CBPR baby with tribal partners who really taught me a lot about what it means to be in somebody else's land. Because as a Jew, I'm in the diaspora. I don't have land. Forgive me, but I hate Israel right now, and I don't believe that's my land. So I am, I believe I'm a Jew in the diaspora. And so I really appreciated learning from people who really believe in their land. That was a real learning for me. And so and all of the knowledge that comes with that history. And so that was really exciting for me. And that's how I started learning about CBPR. So I owe a lot to the first kids that I worked with in Laguna Acoma, actually. From the Laguna Acoma High School. They were from Laguna and Acoma. They all met at the high school. That's who I first learned from. And then I was able to start the MPH in 1994, did a lot of organizing at the legislature, and we were able to start the first graduate program in 1994. And so then I just started teaching, doing work in the Department of Health, did a lot of work in healthy communities with tribal and a lot of other communities in New Mexico. Got my first big grant, CDC grant with the tribes in 1999 with Hamas and San Diego, actually. And then just kind of it moved. And I don't think I really started doing CBPR till 5 years later when I actually people said to me what they wanted me to do. I was still kind of running the show here. I was getting grants and whatever, but in partnership. But until people said, will you help us with this? And we got the first grant in 2005. That's when I really started. I felt this real partnering.
Which grant was it?
It was a family listings grant. Yeah, because we had done all this work in this CDC grant of what are the strengths and capacities of these two communities. And then what emerged after a lot of qualitative work that we had advisory councils, we had all advisory committees, which they directed, our tribal partners directed. they said, they started saying, this is what we're learning. We're learning about this disconnect with elders and kids. Can you help us? And can we find a program? And so they asked me, and Lorenda was working with me at the time, and others. They asked us, can you help us? Can you help us create a program? And we said, well, we don't know what we're doing, but yes, but so that's when I felt I really started understanding CDPR. I mean, I've done all this other work in the 80s, but it was till 2005 where I said, oh, this is different when the community asks you. It wasn't like I wasn't partnering. We had advisory committees, we did all this work together, but it was different. It felt really different. So then I started working with Jemez for a long time. I still work with Raymond Navajo and Jemez Pueblo, and then Mesquero Apache, and then started our Center for Participatory Research here, started the Institute in 2009. All of these things started in 2006. That was a really big journey for me in this mid-2000s, because that's when we started the Engage for Equity study. I got the first big NIH grant, and then it kept going. And Engage for Equity has been this learning about what are important, best promising practices, how do we change the field, which is mine. And now I have all these wonderful people I work with constantly. We have the Compass grant, we have different, health sciences is big in the ground, right? So we all partner with each other and we help each other and we get grants, but we have to learn how to write them too. And then community partners, we help. Some things we do, people say to us, will you help me write this grant? It has nothing to do with me. But yes, of course your partners ask you. So of course you help them. And so you it all goes around as far as I can tell. And then I have my new baby granddaughter. The most important thing. So I had to wait a long time, but here she is. But family listening is still really an important project. The E-Squared Engage for Equity, E-Squared Plus is really important. And I work on a big Compass Award with Dorita Pajaka here in Shannon, which we're serving community-based organizations all over the country. And of course, everybody is in tremendous fear, right? So how do we do our work acknowledging the fear and still moving forward? And, and it's real. It's not real. So there is this big question mark. But I think we still have each other, is my belief. We have to believe in each other.